What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Crucial Convo Podcast. You're tapped into your gracious host, Kojo Afriye. If you have not hit the subscribe button, I urge you to do so. I appreciate all the new subscribers. I want to talk about a couple of things tonight. We're going to talk about the great divorce between Elon Musk and Donald Trump for a little bit and talk about some of what's going on now. Before we get into what Elon Musk had to say about the big, beautiful bill, I saw a cut in a program today. Now, there's cuts in many programs. We're going to go through a little bit of the big, beautiful bill, but there have been cuts, obviously, in Section 8 SNAP. But what I saw a cut in Job Corp. So for those who aren't familiar with Job Corp was established in 1964 by Lyndon B. Johnson. It's basically a program to provide vocational training and job training for young adults, low-income young adults. So this program has been around for a long time. It's something that it's administered by the Department of Labor.
Department of Labor announcing the beginning of a phased pause in the operations at contractor-operated Job Corp centers nationwide, including the one right here in Western Mass, beginning on June 30th. Earlier today, I spoke with staff and students at the Westover Job Corp in Chicopee who say this recent closure announcement is shocking, and they're worried for all the students currently involved in the program.
You're ripping people away from something that was probably their only chance at stability.
The United States Department of Labor announcing the closure of all contractor-operated Job Corps centers across the country. The organization offers students who may have struggled in traditional schooling the chance to learn various trades, providing them with housing, food, medical care, and other necessities they need to land a job.
There's really nothing like Job Corp. Job Corp, the residence piece, the wraparound services piece, the comprehensiveness of this piece is not modeled in any other program.
Western Mass News spoke with David Barker, Center Director for the Westover Job Corps in Chicopee. He tells us the news about the organization's closure is heartbreaking for students, staff, and the local community.
It's impacting these students in significant ways. And the saddest part is they came here to come out of that space and become a productive member, join these unions, be carpenters, be plumbers, be electricians.
We also spoke with Job Corps students who tell Western Mass News with the facility closing soon, they're worried what the future will look like.
Coming to Job Corp for me, it kind of changed the way I think. Kind of changed the way how I see other people and how I act, everything. It changed everything for me. When I first got here, I was fresh off the streets, just, getting into trouble, doing certain things, and this place molded me into a man.
Talking about Job Corps, so when we get down to it, the reality is that I think that programs like this should not be cut, for many reasons. It's always been around. I heard about it when I was growing up. A lot of people sometimes who were having trouble in school or maybe getting locked up in juvie or headed down the wrong road, they would head to Job Corp. It'd almost be like a military school almost in a way, but it's training you for some type of job, right? So mainly getting into trades, auto, plumber, electrician, carpentry, all that stuff is really good. Now, from what I'm seeing, some of the issues with the Department of Labor in relation to Job Corp, they're saying that it's because of some of the outcomes. So Job Corp, and I'm surprised that it only has an average graduation rate of about 38%. So, not even half are graduating from it. Now, I don't really know why, but what they're saying is that it costs about $80,000 per student to be in Job Corp, and it's saying after Job Corp, the average student earns about $16,000 a year, which to me is crazy work, because if you're learning to do, some of these jobs, even being a mechanic or electrician or whatever, I don't understand where the $16,000 annually is coming from, but the program has been paused by the Department of Labor. So the program enrolls about 60,000 young people annually between the ages of 16 to 24. So we're really talking about the generation Zers right now. And I think that Job Corp in and of itself, it doesn't represent the trade programs for all young people. But, I was talking about this a couple of days ago about how younger people now are looking for alternatives away from college because the average college student is leaving with about $40,000 worth of debt. People are looking at college as far as the ROI, return on investment, as, is this really a good idea for me to go to college? It may not be for everybody. So here's another interesting fact. These are 2023 stats. They're talking about some of the serious incident reports. So they had 14,000 infractions in the program in 2023. They had safety concerns, about 1,700 acts of violence. They also had about 1,600 reported cases of drug use and safety and security issues in 2023. I don't know if that's the main issue, but I do think the graduation rate of 38% is a little low in my opinion. But again, I don't really know. I mean, I don't know if everybody who goes to Job Corp has a troubled past and some just don't want to stay in it. I don't want to assume that, but I think the graduation rate should be higher. Now, why I disagree with this being cut is that, these things that you're going to Job Corp for, these kids need to get into these trades. And I think there is a deficiency in plumbing, electricians. There's a deficiency in carpentry. We know that for a fact. And especially American men, right, who are not necessarily going to college. I mean, there's more women that are going to college, which is fine. But I think young men, who don't want to go to college, who don't want to do maybe a white collar job, these trades are going to have to be done. We need people in those fields. AI is not going to fully take these positions, right? So I don't think that they should be cutting this. For whatever reason, they decided to cut it. But let's go over to Elon Musk. Now, this is surprising to me because Elon Musk, since Trump has gotten into office, has been, everybody... all the people who didn't vote for Donald Trump. And I've told people, hate me or not hate me, I did vote for Donald Trump. I thought he was the better choice, and I did vote for him, right? So it doesn't make me a MAGA, super conservative. It doesn't make me the devil or whatever you want to call me, but I did vote for Donald Trump. Now, all the while since Elon Musk had started Doge, and especially since Doge kicked up, we all knew Doge was going to happen before the election. But once Doge started going in there and looking at different agencies and recommending cuts and things like that and reports on fraud and waste, Donald Trump and Elon Musk have been like, as far as the people who don't like them, the two-headed devil, right? People hated Elon Musk at one point more than they hated Donald Trump. I mean, if you remember, it seems like it's old news, but people were burning Teslas a couple of months ago. Tesla stock took a nasty dump, and it's a lot has happened in the last 6 months, right? So needless to say, Musk has decided to move on, which he said he was going to do. From my understanding, I thought he was going to leave in 2026. I guess Doge is still in the process. They're still there. But I guess Elon Musk's role, he's decided to relieve himself a little bit early. The interesting thing is that this big, beautiful bill that has made it through the House, and I think now is going to be kind of, have some tweaking by the Senate. Musk has decided that he slammed the big, beautiful bill, which kind of surprised me. But Musk went on X, of course, and he said, I can't stand this anymore. He said that Trump's bill was a pig fueled or a fat type of bill.
Elon Musk taking aim at President Trump's big, beautiful bill. It faces a lot of opposition from Republicans in the Senate. Musk posting on X, I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional...
Pork-filled, that's the word I was looking for. Pork-filled. It's pork-filled, outrageous bill.
Spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You did wrong. You know it. Yeah. This is hardly like the first time that Trump and Musk have had a spat over policy. So it's unsurprising in that respect. What is surprising, I would argue, is like how openly he is showing his anger.
Well, I would argue that had Trump not spent 4 years already inside the swamp known as Washington, D.C., inside the Beltway, that he probably would have said the same thing about this bill, because a business person who's used to getting things done efficiently could only look at this bill and say it's the most inefficient piece of crap I've ever seen. I mean, it really is a horrible, horrible bill when you think of all that stuff that the politicians shove into it. At the same time, you have to think of what is worse for Republicans. And what would be worse for Republicans is if the tax cuts from 2017 time out and they end up with a tax increase on their watch, which would mean they would lose the midterms, and the Democrats would be totally in charge, or at the very least stop every single thing that Donald Trump wants to do.
The big, beautiful bill. So what was Musk's issue with the bill? Now, from my understanding, Musk's issue with the bill was a lot of the spending. So the debt ceiling is going to be raised, right? So you're going to have some increased spending. And the big, beautiful bill, the thing about it is that it depends on who you talk to, right? So for months, the Democrats have been talking about how they're going to be cuts to Medicaid and healthcare. It's projected that 14 million people could lose healthcare under this bill. I don't know if that's a fact, but this is projected what people are talking about. Now, healthcare is a really complicated situation in this country. I'm not going to get into it that deeply, but I think that my personal opinion on healthcare, one of the reasons why healthcare is so expensive is because we're so freaking unhealthy in this country. If we took care of ourselves a little bit better, I think healthcare costs wouldn't be so astronomical. And again, that's just one part of the argument. I know a lot of people talk about, in Canada and the UK and here and Sweden, and healthcare is free and you can go to the hospital, it's no problem. I don't have a beef with that. But I think I don't think that America could ever pay for healthcare in this country because we eat like crap and we are sick people in this country. I ain't sick, but I'm saying that there's a lot of people that are sick in this country who do not take care of themselves. And look, I'm not here to judge. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, our basis of our diet and how we live here is a lot different than other places where the government takes care of the healthcare, right? So that's a big thing. And that, again, it comes into the whole food industry and what we eat, but that's a whole nother story. Now, in relation to Musk, it seems like he had an issue with the debt ceiling being raised, and why, right? I can understand it in a sense because the whole point of DOGE, the whole point of the Department of Government Efficiency was to go in, cut spending and cut waste, right? And the whole point that Elon Musk made from the beginning was decreasing the deficit by half. That was his big thing. We want to cut the deficit by $1 trillion. That was something he talked about. Now, throughout the time where he worked on these cuts, him and the team worked on these cuts, they were saying they found about $1 trillion worth of cuts. They were going to be able to do this. And the goal, I believe, was to cut the deficit in half by 2026, because that's when Doge is supposed to wrap up. Now, as he leaves the White House, again, I don't think Doge has ended, but Elon's role or his role in it, he seemed to like he's going off on his own way to leave the Doge team to handle it. But he seems to be annoyed by the fact that this bill, the things that are in it, are increasing the debt ceiling, which kind of undermines what Doge was in there to do in the first place, right? So there's these 2017 tax cuts that are set to expire in September, which I guess this bill is going to reinforce those or keep those going, because if those expire, those tax cuts are going to go away, and those who are earning on the top or echelon would be paying more taxes, right? So now let me get on to the big beautiful bill. There are some things in there as far as tax cuts. So if you haven't read it, the big beautiful bill, it's about 47 pages, I want to say. I haven't read all the way through it. I've read through some of it, but the average American isn't about to pull up this bill and read through it line by line. That we got better things to do. We have other things we have to deal with, but there are some things to pay attention to as far as cuts. So they're going to, increase the child care credit, $500, raising it to $2,500. So if you have children, that's something to look at. Another big thing that Trump was talking about before the election was exemptions for taxes on tips and overtime. So I think that will help, especially people in the service industry, mainly waiters and people working in food service. I mean, the tips, and they're asking you to tip everywhere, man. Everywhere I go to buy something, and they asking me for a tip. Even at the local taco place down the block, I buy tacos, and everywhere is asking you when you go to pay, do you want to leave a tip? Hell no, you didn't do anything but just make my food. It wasn't like you brought it to a table. But anyway, for people who are waiters, this will be good for you. And then also there's a deduction up to $10,000 on auto loans, only on cars that are assembled in the U.S., and this is going through 2029. So that's something. They're raising the cap on deductions for state and local taxes to $40,000 for taxpayers earning less than $500,000. What else? There's an additional standard deduction of $4,000 for seniors between 2025 and 2028. There's some other stuff in there. So $1,000 savings account for children, with federal government contributing $1,000 to accounts for children born through 2024 and through 2028. So now here's the beef. Now the Democrats, the biggest beef they're going to have with this bill is obviously the spending. Now, I talked about this a couple of days ago in regards to SNAP and Section 8 and the whole welfare reform. I think welfare reform, to look at it, is good. I do think the argument is going to be, again, it's always going to be about, why are you attacking the pennies, right? Why are you attacking Medicaid? Why are you attacking the welfare programs, anything Section 8, SNAP? Why are you attacking those things and going after those things and not going after defense? Now, defense is something America has always spent a lot of money on. So I think that, this is an argument that Jasmine Crockett has made, and, other Democrats have made. And I mean, it's valid, you know what I'm saying? But I think that America has always spent a lot of money on defense. Even during Biden's term, the amount of money spent on defense went up. And that's just the country that we are, right? So I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But it is interesting to see that Elon Musk is not happy about this. The one thing that at least the White House is talking about is that the deficit will not be, although it will be raised in spending, right? The goal with Donald Trump's tariffs is to bring in more revenue via tariffs, and to not just be, the main income as far as the government, it comes from income taxes. So Donald Trump has always talked about the external revenue service, right? The ERS instead of the IRS. He's always talked about more money coming in through tariffs. Through tariffs, they're hoping to raise more money to offset, the income tax that won't be coming in from us via the tax cut. So we'll see if that's something that's going to work. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in midterms next year, because even with all this, I told people this from the beginning, right? Everybody feels like, it's about Democrat and Republican, and it is to an extent. But the Democrats, the main issue they're going to have is that the things that have been touched on in this country thus far, whether it be waste and abuse, whether it be reform on different programs, whether it be foreign policy, tariffs, trade imbalance, all these things are conversations. People agree and disagree about these things, but these are things that I don't think has really touched the average American the way it has during this, particular short 6 months. I think people are really aware of all these things. Now, the average American cares about a couple of things. What are things going to cost me? Do I have employment, right? And am I safe, right? Is the country safe? So I think these are the three things we're thinking about day in, day out. But the Democrats still have one issue, in my opinion. They're going to have a clear message about where they want to take the country and what is it that they want to do in relation to the country's trajectory. And I think that's something we still have to deal with. Now, I'm going to play this video for a little bit. I want to talk about the Democrats' issue with men, right? Because there's still in my opinion, there's still a clear distance between young men feeling connected to the Democratic Party. And this is why I started this whole show off by talking about the cuts to Job Corp. Because Job Corp, in my opinion, it's not just a man thing, but Job Corp relates to the trades, the things that people want to put their hands on. Now, Donald Trump ran as being a president who is really catering to America, but I think a lot of men tuned into him because he talked about manufacturing. He talked about the blue collar guy. These are the people that, a lot of people that aligned with Trump and voted for him because they felt like, okay, we have somebody who's paying attention to us. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole LGBTQ thing. That is something that look, I'm not going to get into that. But as far as relating to men, there are many things that I think that Democrats need to do to relate to men. And men in this country have been kind of ignored. There's been this whole toxic masculinity conversation and all of that. And I think that younger men just didn't relate to the Democrats this time around when it came to the election. So
yeah, it's very interesting, Joe. For people our age, sometimes we may look at the complaints coming from young men and we may dismiss them. Maybe not everybody does, but some of us might, because we all remember growing up not always having enough money, or not always getting the girl, or not always getting the job we want. But as I learned from talking to Democrats, as well as demographic specialists and others who have been talking to young men over the past couple of years, and we're talking now, young men from ages 18 to 29, but particularly 18 to 24, who were particularly impacted by the pandemic. These young men have experienced just a much different world than we did, right? So if you came up in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, there was a sense of possibility no matter what your difficulties were. I spoke to Richard Reeves, who runs the American Institution for Men and Boys, and he talked about just this little fact that right around 2015, 2016 is when the term toxic masculinity entered the lexicon. Now, this can be a politically charged term. I know a lot of people will have opinions about this, but what this sort of has added up to for many men is this idea that they can't just be men, be boys, joke around, not be misogynist, not be rude, but just be masculine, that there is something inherently wrong with them because of just who they are. And Donald Trump and J.D. Vance both spoke to that in a particular way, in part because of who they are, in part because of how Trump acts. But the message received by these men was simply, it's okay to be who you are. There's nothing wrong with you for doing that. And that is always a huge political winner. And that's why there was such a jump in support for Trump among young men compared to 2020. And in fact, compared to all Democratic presidential nominees, at least going back to the beginning of the century. And Democrats I spoke to are concerned about it. Not all of them, but many of them. And they say the party needs to do something about this to be more competitive in 2028, in part because young men become old men, and your politics that is formed in your 20s often can last for decades, if not the rest of your life.
This is what I'm talking about. Now, the Democrats definitely have to worry about this. And he's so right. I think that young men, the reason why the Democrats have to relate to them is because they need to reach out to young men to help them understand that they have a place. And that, there's a big issue with young men right now, as far as a lot of young men do not feel like they can afford a family, do not feel like they can afford to be married, and are not feeling included in society because of this idea of toxic masculinity. And I think a big part of that is that we need to make sure we have a place for all men to provide for themselves. And that's where I get back to this whole idea of the trades. And I think that they need to institute the trades. What I would do if it were me, we need to allocate funding to put trades, some form of trades, back in the high schools. That's what I would do, because that would be, not only for young men, it would help young women too, but to put trades back in the high school and have people have an opportunity to get a feel for that before they get out of high school, whether it be carpentry, auto mechanic. I don't know about construction on that level, but any other trades that you could put into high school that used to be there, I think they should institute that back. When I was growing up, I went to high school in the 90s, but it was just kind of phasing out in the 90s, and that's when they started to push, everybody needs to go to college, everybody go to college, everybody go to college, and they got rid of the trades. I don't really understand why they got rid of the trades, but that's a whole nother conversation. But getting rid of the trades is, to me, that's when it started to disconnect from men, because these young men, he's right, this is what they remember. They don't remember 9/11 and the Great Recession. They weren't living, or they weren't old enough at that time, but now they remember the pandemic and the world after. So I think the Democrats have to do that. They also have to stop they have to stop with the bad commercials. We all remember the monumentally bad commercial that had maybe I should just play it, but for those of you who don't remember from the campaign. So when I say never ever do this again, ever never do this again.
I'm a man.
I'm a man, man.
And I'm man enough.
I'm man enough to enjoy a barrel-proof bourbon.
Meat.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
Man enough to deadlift 500, then braid the out of my daughter's hair.
You think I'm afraid to rebuild a carburetor? I eat carburetors for breakfast.
I ain't afraid of bears.
That's what bear hugs are for.
I'll tell you another thing I sure as shit am not afraid of. Women.
I'm not afraid of women.
I'm not afraid of women.
They want to control their bodies? I say go for it.
They want to use IVF to start a family? I'm not afraid of families.
They want to be childless cat ladies?
Have all the cats you want.
Woman wants to be president?
Well, I hope she has the guts to look me right in the eye and accept my full-throated endorsement.
Because I'm man enough to support women.
Man enough to know what kind of donuts I like.
Man enough to admit I'm lost, even when I refuse to ask for directions.
Man enough to not ban young women from reading Little Women.
Or one of those pants books that the sisters like.
I'm man enough to raw dog a flight. It sucked. Not worth it.
I'm man enough to be emotional in front of my wife.
In front of my kids.
In front of my horse.
I'm man enough to tell you that I cry at Love Actually.
Goodwill Hunting.
Yo, all right, so you guys get the point. If you had, I'm sure everybody saw this before. I had to refresh everybody's memory. This is so wild. But anyway, this is what I think the Democrats have to speak to now. What they have to deal with as far as the black community is also a whole nother issue. But I think that, again, as we get into, 2026, when we get into the midterms and we get obviously into the next presidential election in 2028, I hope the Democrats really start to just talk to men normally. And again, I think that my point in saying all this is that it may be a good idea to allocate some funds for young men. Job Corp is only one thing, but allocate apprentice programs and things for younger men to get into, in high school and thereafter. I think that would be a great play. That would be a great thing for young men, not just young black men, but young men in general. If they were to allocate funds, that would speak directly to young men, particularly in these trades. Now, I don't have the figures as far as the man to woman ratio in plumbing and construction and electricians and so on, but I'm willing to bet that the vast majority of the people in those trades are men, right? Those are male trades, let's be honest, right? So not saying there aren't females in those trades, but those trades speak directly to men. So if I were the Democrats, I would start to talk about allocating money in that direction. Trump and the administration right now cutting Job Corp is a bad idea because, again, it does talk about one group of men, mainly men, but some women too. But what it does is that you're essentially digging at the people who would have voted for you, the people who are going into these blue collar jobs. Those are the people who voted for Donald Trump. So I think that was a bad look for them to pause that program. So if I was the Democrats, focus on the trades. That's where kids are looking at. The Gen Zs are not all focused on college. So college is not the be all end all. It is important, but focus on trades and specialized learning for trades. I think they should focus on that. Also, never do this commercial again. Never, ever, ever do that bad commercial again. Men are just normal people. And if you're talking to the Gen Zs, they are growing. They are trying to find a way to feed themselves and buy a house and, buy a condo and survive, and the same as women. But if you want to speak to men, you have to speak to men normally, right? So this is something to think about. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. It's an interesting time, but I do think that we're going to see what happens with, we're going to see what happens with the great divorce. Donald Trump is trucking along. He's doing what he's doing. Look, for me personally, I don't think that you're ever going to be happy with any president through and through with every decision they make, so I don't think it's about, choosing Democrat or Republican. I'll gladly vote for a Democrat in 2028, but whoever comes up to the plate to play ball as far as the president in 2028 has to understand that so much has changed in the country. Even Barack Obama's luster has faded, and you can't just talk to groups of people with hope and dreams and we'll all come together and sit at the table. You got to dig at these issues, and like it or not, I think Trump has dug at these issues and at least gotten to a point where we've been able to have a conversation. So but anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you haven't subscribed, definitely hit that subscribe button. This is a Crucial Convo podcast. Let me know what you think in the comments, good or bad, and I'll talk to you guys in a minute. Out of here.